The idea struck me at breakfast, right between pouring milk into my son's cereal and tying my daughter's shoelaces. Samantha had been gone for a week at that corporate retreat, and while I had kept the house running as smoothly as I could, the kids were starting to miss her more than they let on. I couldn't blame them. I missed her too. Dad, when is Mom coming home? Oliver, my 7-year-old, asked as he absent-mindedly pushed his spoon around the bowl. Yeah, she hasn't even called goodnight for 2 days, added Lily, who at 10 was already sharp enough to notice when things felt off. She's been busy, sweetheart, I said, forcing a reassuring smile. But, you know what? Maybe we should surprise her. Their faces lit up immediately, and I felt a flicker of excitement myself. Samantha had no idea. What better way to show her that we missed her than by flying out and surprising her at the lodge? While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. I grabbed my phone and checked flights to Aspen. The lodge was in the mountains, an exclusive retreat for executives, some high-end place her company had booked for team building. It seemed like the perfect setting for a warm family reunion. I imagined her eyes widening with joy when she saw us, how she'd drop everything and pull the kids into a hug. Maybe we'd stay a night, make it a fun little getaway. Still, there was a nagging feeling in my gut. It was small, barely a whisper, but it was there. Samantha had been distant lately. I had chalked it up to work stress, long hours, important projects. But there were other things too. She had stopped texting as often. Her voice had lost that familiar warmth when we spoke on the phone. The last time I called, she barely spoke for a minute before hanging up, mumbling something about a meeting. But I shoved those doubts aside. I was just overthinking things. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe she really did have back-to-back meetings. The best way to make sure? Show up and see for myself. All right, I said, clapping my hands. Pack your bags, guys. We're going to surprise Mom. Lily and Oliver cheered, running upstairs to grab their things. As I booked the flights, a nervous energy settled in my chest. I told myself it was just excitement. It had to be excitement. The airport was packed, a chaotic swirl of travelers rushing to their gates, rolling luggage over polished floors, and making last-minute dashes for coffee before boarding. I held Oliver's hand tightly as we navigated through the crowd while Lily clutched her backpack, walking beside me like a little adult. I hope Mom's gonna love this surprise, she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. She'll be so happy to see us, I assured her, though something in my gut twisted at the words. I had told myself over and over that Samantha's distance was just work stress, but there was a lingering unease I couldn't shake. I pulled out my phone to send her a text. Hey babe, hope everything's going well. Thinking about you. I hesitated before pressing send. If she responded right away, I'd feel better. If not, well, I wasn't sure what I'd do with that answer. We checked in, made it through security, and soon found ourselves waiting at the gate. Oliver leaned his head against my arm, already drowsy. How long is the flight? He mumbled. Not too long, buddy, I said. We'll be there before you know it. The flight itself was smooth, the kids marveling at the snow-capped mountains visible through the small windows. Lily kept snapping pictures with her tablet, already planning to show them to her mom when we arrived. I kept checking my phone, waiting for Samantha's response. Nothing, not even a read receipt. By the time we landed in Aspen, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the mountains. The cold hit us as soon as we stepped outside, a crisp bite in the air that made Oliver shiver. Whoa, it's freezing, he said, pulling his jacket tighter. Mom's gonna love this, Lily said, already taking more pictures. It's so pretty. I hailed a cab, and we piled inside, the kids chatting excitedly about skiing, snowball fights, and all the fun we were going to have. But as the driver weaved through the winding roads toward the secluded lodge, I found myself gripping my phone again. I called Samantha this time. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. She's probably just busy, I muttered to myself, but the doubt was clawing at my chest now. I had never been the paranoid type, but something was off. The lodge came into view, a grand, rustic building with towering windows and a soft glow emanating from within. It was the kind of place built for luxury and relaxation, surrounded by tall pines dusted with snow. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, and I couldn't help but wonder which one belonged to Samantha. Lily was practically bouncing in her seat. "Let's go find Mom." I forced a smile. "Yeah, let's go surprise her." I paid the driver and helped the kids out of the car, then grabbed our bags. The three of us walked up to the entrance, my heart pounding harder with each step. I told myself it was just nerves, just the excitement of the surprise. But deep down, I wasn't so sure anymore. The moment we stepped into the lodge, warmth wrapped around us, a stark contrast to the icy air outside. A fire roared in the grand stone fireplace, its flames dancing against the high wooden beams. Soft jazz played through the speakers, and the scent of pine and burning wood filled the air. The front desk was polished, gleaming under the warm glow of chandeliers, and behind it stood a young woman in a tailored uniform, her name tag reading Emily. I approached, gripping Oliver's hand while Lily looked around in awe. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm looking for my wife, Samantha Marshall. She's staying here for the corporate retreat." Emily glanced at me, then at the kids, her polite smile wavering just slightly before she turned to her computer. "One moment, please." She typed something into the system, her expression unreadable. I noticed the slight shift in her demeanor, the way her lips pressed together just a little tighter. A few seconds passed. Then she looked up, hesitating. Yes. Mrs. Marshall checked in a few days ago." Relief tried to settle in my chest, but it didn't last long. Something about her tone didn't feel right. I cleared my throat. "Great. Can you tell me her room number? I'd love to surprise her." She hesitated again. Then she gave me a tight, professional smile. "I'm afraid I can't disclose that information, sir." I frowned. "I'm her husband." "I understand," she said, her fingers tapping against the keyboard nervously. "But we have privacy policies in place. I can call her room for you." I exhaled sharply, the first real spike of irritation hitting me. "That's fine." Emily picked up the phone and dialed. I watched as she listened. After a few seconds, she frowned and hung up. "She's not answering." A cold feeling crawled up my spine. I forced a chuckle. "Probably at dinner or something." Emily nodded, but something was off in the way she looked at me. "Would you like to leave a message?" "No," I said quickly. "We'll find her ourselves." I turned to the kids. "Let's check out the restaurant first." Lily grinned. "Ooh, maybe she's having hot chocolate by the fireplace." Oliver tugged on my sleeve. "What if we sneak up behind her and yell surprise?" I forced a smile. "That's the plan, buddy." We walked through the main lodge, passing couples sipping wine and business people laughing in small groups. The restaurant was dimly lit, intimate, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the snowy landscape. My eyes scanned the tables, my heart pounding a little harder with every second that passed. Samantha wasn't here. I exhaled, trying to push away the worry. Maybe she's in the lounge. We checked. Nothing. The spa. The outdoor deck. The bar. Nothing. The unease in my stomach twisted into something sharper. Where was she? I pulled out my phone and called her again. Straight to voicemail. Lily frowned. Maybe she's asleep? I didn't want to scare the kids, but my patience was wearing thin. Maybe. We walked back to the front desk, and I tried again. "Listen, Emily. I get the privacy thing, but I'm here with my kids. We came all this way to surprise my wife, and now I can't even find her. Can you at least tell me if she checked in alone?" That hesitation again. A flicker of discomfort in her eyes. She shifted on her feet, glancing around as if to make sure no one else was listening. She dropped her voice. "She didn't check in alone, sir." I felt my breath hitch. My fingers clenched around the counter. "Who?" Emily swallowed. I'm really not supposed to." "Who?" I repeated, my voice harder now. She looked away. "A man." The world tilted slightly. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wanted to demand more details, but my kids were standing right beside me, watching, listening. I forced my voice to stay even. "Do you know his name?" Emily shook her head quickly. "No, sir. But I'm really sorry." I nodded stiffly, my mind racing. "Thank you." I turned to my children, forcing a smile. "How about we go grab some hot chocolate and hang out by the fire?" Lily clapped her hands.
Yes.
Oliver yawned. Can I have marshmallows? Of course, buddy. As we walked toward the lounge, my stomach churned. A man. Who? And more importantly, why hadn't she told me? The steaming cups of hot chocolate did little to warm the cold not forming in my gut. I sat with Oliver and Lily near the fireplace, pretending to be interested in their giggling as they dunked marshmallows into their drinks. My mind was elsewhere, locked on Emily's words. She didn't check in alone. A man. The statement rattled around in my skull like loose change. Samantha's silence, the ignored calls, the receptionist's hesitation. It all pointed to something I didn't want to believe. But I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. Lily, buddy, how about you take your brother to the game room? I asked, forcing my voice to stay light. I saw an arcade near the lobby. Lily's face lit up. Can we play air hockey? Of course. She grabbed Oliver's hand, and they ran off, leaving me alone. I exhaled sharply, rubbing my hands over my face. Then, I pulled out my phone and opened our shared banking app. If Samantha had booked this room under her name, there would be a record. The latest charge from the hotel flashed on the screen. Luxury cabin, 3 nights, 2 guests. 2 guests. A fresh wave of nausea surged through me. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was happening. I shoved my phone into my pocket and stood. The time for waiting was over. I was going to find her. Moving swiftly, I made my way through the halls, my pulse thumping in my ears. My first stop was the restaurant again, scanning the booths and tables, but she wasn't there. The bar was just as empty. I approached a passing bellhop. Excuse me. I'm looking for my wife, Samantha Marshall. She's staying here for the retreat. The young man gave me a polite but wary look. I'm sorry, sir. I can't give out guest information. I get it, I said, keeping my frustration in check. But I just need to know if she's in her room. His lips pressed into a thin line. I can't. Look, man. I leaned in slightly. I have 2 kids here who haven't seen their mom in days. I just need to find her. That did the trick. His expression softened. He hesitated, then nodded. I saw her head toward the cabins about 20 minutes ago. The private ones near the lake. Private cabins. Not the main lodge. My stomach twisted. Thanks, I muttered, already moving. The walk to the cabins was short, but it felt like miles. My breath came in quick bursts, clouds of condensation disappearing into the cold night air. The closer I got, the more I braced myself for what I might find. When I reached cabin 7, my feet halted. The lights inside were dim, but the fireplace cast flickering shadows against the curtains. 2 figures moved inside. My fists clenched. I stepped forward, ready to knock, when a voice stopped me in my tracks. Laughter. Hers. A sound I used to love. A sound that now made my skin crawl. I stepped back, my heartbeat hammering in my chest. A part of me wanted to barge in, demand answers, but another part, the smarter part, knew that confrontation wouldn't get me the proof I needed. Not yet. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera. The room's large windows were enough to capture what I needed. My hands trembled as I zoomed in, and then I saw him. Not Aiden. Not the coworker I had suspected. No, it was someone else. Someone I recognized immediately. Ryan, our personal trainer. The man I had paid, trusted, to help Samantha with her fitness goals. The man she had insisted was just a good friend. My fingers tightened around my phone as I snapped the photo. Proof. Samantha, wrapped in nothing but a blanket, curled up beside Ryan on the couch. The fire between them cast a golden glow, turning the moment into something intimate. Too intimate. A wine bottle sat on the table, half empty. The sheets on the bed were tangled. I felt like the ground beneath me had vanished. The weight of betrayal crashed down on me, suffocating, crushing. I exhaled shakily, forcing myself to think. Don't act now. Stay in control. I stepped back into the shadows, my chest heaving with every breath. Now, I had everything I needed. My fingers curled around my phone as I stared at the image, the undeniable proof of betrayal flashing on the screen. Samantha, wrapped in a blanket, her body angled toward Ryan as they sat beside the fire, the kind of scene I once thought was reserved for us. The way she smiled, The way she leaned into him, it made my stomach churn. I had seen that look before. It was the same way she used to look at me. I should have barged in, should have kicked the door open, demanded answers, shattered the illusion she had built around me. But I didn't. No, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I wasn't going to lose control. Instead, I forced myself to step back, take a deep breath, and think. This wasn't the time for rage. This was the time for clarity. I turned away from the cabin, shoving my phone into my pocket, and walked back toward the main lodge. My mind was racing, but I had already made my decision. I was going to confront her. Not here. Not in some private little love nest where she could twist the story. No, I would make sure she had no way to escape it. I waited until the next morning. The lodge's dining hall was packed, filled with employees from Samantha's company enjoying their breakfast before the day's retreat activities. Samantha sat at a corner table, laughing with a few of her coworkers, the picture-perfect image of a devoted wife on a business trip. Ryan was nowhere in sight. I stepped forward, my heart pounding but my face calm. She noticed me the moment I reached the table, her eyes widening in shock. "Ethan?" She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "What are you doing here?" I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table, screen facing up. The image of her and Ryan glowed in the morning light. Silence. The chatter in the dining hall continued, but at this table, time had frozen. Samantha's face drained of color as she stared at the screen. One of her coworkers glanced down, eyes widening in realization before quickly looking away. I leaned in, keeping my voice level but firm. "You want to try that question again?" Samantha's mouth opened, then closed. She reached for my phone, but I pulled it back. "Ethan, I can explain." "Explain?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Explain what, exactly? That you've been sneaking around behind my back? That every business trip was really just another excuse to shack up with our trainer?" Her hands trembled as she pushed back her chair. "Please, not here. Let's talk in private." "No," I said, my voice firm. "You didn't give me privacy when you made this choice. You didn't give me honesty when I asked about your late nights. You sure as hell don't get to dictate the terms now." A few heads turned our way, murmurs spreading through the room. Samantha swallowed hard, her eyes darting around. I could see the panic settling in. "Ethan, please." Her voice wavered. "Let's just what? Pretend this didn't happen? Pretend you didn't throw away our family for some cheap fling?" I shook my head. "No, Samantha, I don't pretend." Her hands balled into fists. "It's not what you think," I scoffed. "Oh, so you weren't cuddled up in a cabin with Ryan last night? Drinking wine? Sitting by the fire? That wasn't you?" She hesitated. The worst part? I could see it in her eyes. She was trying to come up with a lie. Even now, I took a step back. "You know what? I don't need to hear whatever excuse you're about to come up with." I turned toward the exit. "Enjoy the rest of your retreat." She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "For what it's worth," I said over my shoulder, "you should have been more careful. Because now, I hold all the cards." I walked out, leaving her standing there, the weight of her betrayal crashing down on her in front of everyone. I stepped outside, the cold mountain air biting at my face as I inhaled deeply, trying to steady my racing heart. The confrontation had gone exactly as I wanted. Public, undeniable, and leaving Samantha with nowhere to run. But instead of feeling satisfied, I felt an emptiness creeping in. I had won that battle, sure, but the war wasn't over yet. I had kids to think about. I had a life to rebuild. I walked toward the parking lot, my mind running through what needed to happen next. I had left the kids back at the lodge with a babysitter, not wanting them anywhere near this mess. Now, I had to get them home, shield them from whatever storm was coming. Before I could reach my truck, I heard the sound of hurried footsteps behind me. "Ethan, wait." I turned, watching as Samantha rushed toward me, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed. She looked desperate, but I wasn't about to make this easy for her. "What?" I asked, crossing my arms. She stopped a few feet away, hesitating as if choosing her words carefully. "Please, just let me explain." I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "Samantha, we're past that. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. It wasn't what it looked like. I let out a bitter laugh. That's the best you've got? Really? She swallowed, glancing around as if making sure no one else was listening. It happened, Ethan. I was lonely. You were always busy with work, always stressed. I needed something, and Ryan. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Don't. Just don't. You don't get to blame this on me. You don't get to act like I pushed you into his arms. I took a step forward, lowering my voice. You lied to me. You made me look like a fool. And the worst part? You were willing to throw everything away for what? Some cheap thrill? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I wasn't thinking, she whispered. No, you were, I shot back. You were thinking every time you texted him, every time you planned these business trips, every time you looked me in the eye and lied. She wiped at her face, taking a shaky breath. I don't want to lose our family. I stared at her, barely recognizing the woman in front of me. You already have. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing heavily, as if she had expected a different outcome. Then, something shifted in her expression, panic turning to defiance. You can't just walk away, she said, voice rising. You're not taking my kids away from me. I felt the anger flare up again, but I kept my composure. I never said I was. But things are going to change, Samantha. You don't get to decide how this plays out anymore. She clenched her jaw, her hands trembling. So that's it? You're just done? I nodded. Yeah, I'm done. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, her world falling apart just as she had shattered mine. I wasn't about to stay and pick up the pieces. That was her mess to deal with now. The drive home felt longer than it should have. The kids were in the back seat, quiet, sensing something was off. My mind was running through every step of what was coming next. This wasn't just about a broken marriage. This was about protecting my family, ensuring that Samantha didn't twist the narrative into something it wasn't. I had seen it before. Cheaters playing the victim, turning the tables, making themselves look like the ones who had been wronged. I wasn't going to let that happen. The moment we got home, I tucked the kids into bed, forcing myself to smile, reassuring them that everything was fine. But the moment I closed their bedroom door, my hands clenched into fists. Everything wasn't fine. My entire world had just imploded, and I had to make sure the fallout didn't destroy my children's lives. The next morning, I made the first call, to a lawyer. The receptionist's voice was warm, professional. Marshall and Carter Law Offices, how can I assist you? I need to schedule a consultation. Divorce proceedings. The words felt foreign in my mouth, but I swallowed the lump in my throat. There was no room for hesitation. Of course, she replied. Earliest availability is this afternoon. Does that work for you? Perfect, I said, hanging up. By noon, I was sitting in a sleek office across from a man named Richard Carter, a seasoned divorce attorney with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. He flipped through the notes I had emailed before the meeting. Infidelity, he murmured, glancing up at me. You have proof? I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the pictures I had taken at the lodge. The intimate setting, the wine bottle. Samantha curled up in a blanket beside Ryan. More than enough. Richard nodded. That helps. Colorado is a no-fault state, so while her affair won't necessarily impact the division of assets, it will be useful if she tries to play the victim in court. I exhaled. She will. She already threatened me, said I wasn't taking her kids. Richard leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. Then we make sure she doesn't get that chance. We file first. We control the narrative. Are you prepared for that? I clenched my jaw. I don't have a choice. Good, he said, sliding a stack of papers toward me. Sign these. This is the first step. I picked up the pen, my hand steady as I scrawled my name at the bottom. A week ago, I never would have imagined sitting here, doing this. But now, I felt like I was finally taking my life back. The moment Samantha received the divorce papers, she showed up at my doorstep. She didn't even knock, just stormed in, waving the documents in the air. You're seriously doing this? I crossed my arms, staying calm. What did you think was going to happen? Her face twisted in anger. You blindsided me. I scoffed. Blindsided you? You cheated, Samantha. I caught you. I had every right to file first. She shook her head, laughing bitterly. You think you're going to win? That you're just going to paint me as the bad guy and walk away with everything? I don't care about winning, I said, my voice even. I care about protecting my kids, and I won't let you manipulate them the way you tried to manipulate me. Her eyes flared. You have no idea what you're doing. Oh, I do, I countered. And so does my lawyer. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her expression. Doubt, maybe even fear. She had expected me to crumble, to be the one begging for answers, for closure. But I wasn't that man anymore. She swallowed hard, gripping the papers so tightly her knuckles turned white. You're making a mistake. No, Samantha, I said, my voice firm. The mistake was thinking I'd ever let you destroy me. She didn't have a response to that. She turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. The day Samantha moved out was quieter than I expected. No screaming, no grand speeches, just the dull sound of cardboard boxes sliding across the floor and the occasional sniffle from her as she packed the last of her things. I stood by the doorway, arms crossed, watching as she carefully folded the kids' old artwork, placing them in a box as if she hadn't just blown our family apart. She turned to face me, her eyes red-rimmed. This doesn't have to be ugly, Ethan. I scoffed, shaking my head. It already is, Samantha. You just don't get to pretend it isn't. She sighed, grabbing the last of her bags before heading toward the door. She hesitated, glancing back at me. For what it's worth, I did love you. I met her gaze, my face unreadable. Yeah, you had a real funny way of showing it. She lingered for a second longer, then walked out. The door clicked shut behind her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, my house, my life, belonged to me again. I didn't have time to process my emotions. The kids needed me. Work needed me. My entire life had been flipped upside down, and if I sat still for too long, I knew the weight of it all would crush me. So, I kept moving. First, I focused on the house. Samantha had taken some of the furniture, but I didn't mind. It gave me an excuse to make the place mine again. I rearranged the living room, threw out the expensive throw pillows she had insisted on, and painted the walls a color I actually liked. It was cathartic, reclaiming my space. Then, I focused on the kids. I made their favorite meals, took them to the park, and listened to every ridiculous story they had to tell. They knew something was different, but I refused to let them feel like their world was crumbling. One evening, as I was tucking them into bed, my son looked up at me, his little brow furrowed. Is Mom ever coming home? I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. She has a new home now, buddy. But she'll still see you, and she still loves you. He nodded slowly, processing the words, then snuggled into his pillow. Okay, good night, Dad. I kissed his forehead, whispering, good night, kiddo, before shutting off the light. Weeks passed, and something strange started happening. I felt lighter. The suffocating weight of betrayal was still there, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. The bitterness, the anger, the resentment, it was still inside me, but it wasn't dictating my every move. I was learning to exist outside of the pain. One afternoon, I met up with an old friend, Mark, who had been through his own nasty divorce. We sat at a small cafe, sipping coffee as he studied me. You look good, he finally said. I laughed. I feel good. He smirked. Didn't think I'd hear you say that for a long time. Me neither, I admitted. But I realized something. I spent so much time thinking my life was over after what she did. But it's not. It's just different now. And honestly, it might even be better. Mark clinked his coffee mug against mine. To fresh starts, then. To fresh starts, I echoed, feeling, for the first time in a long time, like I actually meant it. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't dramatic, but slowly, life started to settle into a new rhythm. The wounds Samantha left behind were still there, but they weren't fresh anymore. They were scars, reminders of what I had survived. And every day, I woke up feeling just a little stronger. Work had picked up again, and I found myself more focused than I had been in years. Without the constant stress of an unraveling marriage weighing me down, my mind was clear. I landed 2 new clients in a single month, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself again. But the real justice, the part one never planned but unfolded beautifully, was what happened to Samantha. At first, she tried to keep up appearances. She posted pictures of her new chapter on social media, smiling in staged photos, pretending like her life hadn't just imploded. But reality has a funny way of catching up. Her affair with Ryan had been nothing but a fantasy, an escape from a life she claimed was unfulfilling. But real life doesn't function like a daydream. A few weeks after she moved in with him, I heard through mutual friends that cracks were already forming. Turns out, Ryan wasn't the exciting, adventurous man she thought he was. He was just another guy with his own baggage, his own flaws, and now she was stuck with him, with no perfect little family to fall back on. And then, the real blow hit her: divorce proceedings. I had been patient, methodical. I had documented everything, every expense, every lie, every moment of abandonment. My lawyer was a shark, and when we stepped into that courtroom, Samantha must have realized, for the first time, that actions had consequences. She tried to play the victim, crying about how I had emotionally neglected her, how she had felt lonely in our marriage. But the evidence was stacked too high against her. The late-night credit card charges at resorts, the texts, the witnesses, it all painted a picture that not even she could manipulate her way out of. The judge wasn't sympathetic. In the end, I got full custody of the kids, the house, and the majority of our shared assets. Samantha, on the other hand, walked away with the scraps. She had fought for spousal support, claiming she had sacrificed so much for our family, but the judge saw right through her. She had chosen her path, and now she had to live with it. She called me once, weeks after the final ruling. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the best of me. "Ethan," she started, her voice softer than I remembered. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't respond, just let the silence stretch between us. "I made a mistake," she continued. I thought I wanted something else, but I didn't. I was stupid, and now I don't even know who I am anymore." I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath. "I used to wish you'd say that," I admitted. "I used to hope you'd regret it, that you'd see what you threw away. But now, I don't care. I really don't." She let out a small, shaky breath. I hope one day you can forgive me." I let her words hang in the air for a moment before replying. "Forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn, and I don't owe you that." And with that, I hung up. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. Life moved on. My kids were happy. I was happy. And Samantha? She had to live with the choices she made. That was justice enough for me. Life after Samantha wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I woke up every morning without the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. The house, once filled with tension and unspoken resentment, was now filled with laughter. Real laughter. The kids were adjusting, slowly but surely. My daughter, Emma, had stopped asking when her mom was coming home. My son, Caleb, no longer hesitated before mentioning her name. The wounds were healing, even if the scars would remain. I focused on being present, on rebuilding what had been broken. Mornings became sacred. Making breakfast, packing lunches, and actually sitting down with the kids before sending them off to school. It was something I had taken for granted before, too caught up in work and a failing marriage. Now, every little moment mattered. One evening, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at me with wide, thoughtful eyes. "Daddy, are you happy now?" The question caught me off guard. I sat on the edge of her bed, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "What makes you ask that?" She shrugged. "You just seem different. Like you're not sad anymore." I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "I think I am happy, sweetheart. It took a long time, but yeah, I think I finally am." She smiled, as if that answer was all she needed, then rolled onto